Hello everyone, welcome to Command Centers, lines and screen location, adaptation lines, correlation and track lines, into position location of black cub, sectors, lines of correlation, lines of communication of Tango Fox. Direct communication sending to travels. Now how we have to identify our system is all over and how we communicate to our settings and travel communications. The more we navigate our settings, the better and easier it gets in transition. Now transition locations comes in correlation lines of pi. Pi tracks its calculation lines of to and from, but we have to really understand how to direct signals location to a setting. The operation line cycles puts everything in operational locations to its calculations. Getting ground lines, powers, and the opposites. The team has a test review and evaluations. We're going to get into that through equation. Welcome everybody, it's General AI Space Time. All right, in position lines of centers, we have to get into modifications, screen lines, adaptations, and configuration of face recognition. This opens up the patterns. Now, the more line centers, let's go through graph calculations. They're going to go through signatures or screens. One signal lines equals lines of correlation lines of two trackification and provision. Okay. Direct modification line, one signal, operate one cycle, one rotation, surface and traction. Right. Direct calculation lines, ground lines. Now, the correlate tracking interference sets the data screens, sets operation line cycles in one center of communication. Right. Center core line centers, Vega is above the system. Okay, Vega's there, right? So her data highways correlates to track lines of each graph, sets lines of communication line at three triangulation lines, center line position. All right. Process communication line screens puts everything in operation line cycles, flywheel tractions, indirect signals into modification location. All right. Saying core lines, highest interference, towers of communication lines, unison and traction. ASCAR, core lines graph calculation setting. All right. Von Q, overline left line rotations of portals and stargates, and center core lines, high interference and deficit, and line track line settings and flywheel traction. Right? So getting direct line centers of data, process communication lines of process correlations, puts all the levels of data screens and line communication setting, and center lines across location signals. Okay? Information graphs correlates to calculation lines of two XT1000s information screen. Direct calculation lines, one screen line adaptation in position of one center correlation. Sets communication lines of triangulation line condition. Okay, center communications programs. Intelligence formation, right? Okay, so directing signals is all about understanding how to go through electrical circuits, circuitry boards, and direct signals. Let's go through platforms and grounds in one set location. That's one platform, right? And let's go to high correlations and calculation screen lines. This updates the surface location, travel lines, and point graph communications and setting. Process communications is understanding what you're doing in travel. Okay. Knowing exactly how to set the position of its tone in track line communication to its position of its program. All right. Center correlation lines of one line, two lines, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 location centers of travel. Points lines of graph calculation lines. So we have battery lines, two lines of communication resistors, graph communications, one center rotation service, correlate to track lines and wires and direct signals. Signal lines, modification line screens, and circuitry boards and correlations of graph calculation setting near binaries, transistor resist location setting, and 9 line set locations at 333, 369 and travel correlation lines of grounds, right? Set position calculations, right? That's the earth tone correlation lines of traction. Okay, Mother Earth, right? Direct calculation lines of panels lines into solar graph screen location, right? Sets seed pods correlations of platforms 1, 2, 3, and 4 in traction. Directs modification lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 set locations of traction. Directs lines of correlation line interference in position lines of GOD. Mechanism over line, screen, and center communication, right? Correlates to travel lines, ground lines, sonars, and pi in track location, right? Direct modification lines in position levels. You guys are now in line communication setting and processing. Direct lines into flywheel track lines, center high interference, into all levels. Position lines out of reaction in line communications in console, navigations and flights, in trackification line calculation setting, flux capacitor. Position is program, lights of communication to its position to its electrical setting. Light bulb interference. Direct lines at 3 panels, set lines communication lines of 3 light bulbs and trackification of center. Process communication system is all levels of travel correlations of intelligence. That's my equation, right? So this is electrical system, ground lines, and all calculated modify how you go from 3, 6, and 9 in platforms. 9 platforms, correlation, track, and interference into encryption. Directs modification lines of circuits, panels, line calculation setting, and constellation. Now we go through data line screen. Graph communications in one signal into position lines of correlation, right? Graph calculation lines of alpha and position of delta, theta, and operation lines of 1, 0, line rotation, surface, and track line condition setting. So it's all about, when I say 1, it's actually 0. So I say 1, it's actually 0. 1 is actually 0, right? So it's all about understanding the transistor is going up in traction, right? Now, it correlates back in 0 in position cross-line signals to 1, 2, and 3, and 4 through pattern in set locations, right? So it's all about understanding how you go from transistors to resistors to its compressors that puts lines of volume in line calculated setting a travel correlation. Directs calculates line center locations when you come to all lines into panels into 3 sectors of correlation attraction. Directs modification lines of high center interference. 1, position of 2, in position of 3 in track location. Sets lines of communication lines into solar screens and directs signals into track location of solar sail. The track locations, right? Comes in modification line screen high interference, puts all communication line screen interference system, travel correlation lines of face recognition. Okay? Boom. All right? All right. Going through graph indicators is ready to understand the process correlation lines of your center lines of your Earth. Sets communication line screens. It directs lines on location system, how to use your plasmasium walls, cells and modification, cell generated screw location settings, and coordinate track interference calculation. Now we go through the blue line screens, sets lines, communication lines, outline, ring line, rotation surface, and outer rounds. Now we go through the brown line correlation, which is the earth tone, sets of tone communication lines of center track location of center communication. Then we go through direct line signals, and we go through modification lines, and all calculated modified into forestry green, sets lines, communication center, and correlation lines of traction. Now, direct communication line is ready to understand how to go through the platforms of center lines of operation surface, right? Direct lines in triangulation and position box frame and correlation lines of data. Process communication of flaps 1, 2, 3, and 4 sets locations. Cross-line signals 1, 2, and 3, and 4 settings set locations. You guys are out of the 7-line signals. You're in 8 lines, 8 lines, 8 lines, 8 lines of traction, right? That directs lines highest interference in 4 tractions, into 4 measures, into 4 locations, 4 symbols, letters, numbers, and shapes in center a track location. Okay? The symbolism line calculation setting is code moving lines of track location system. Now that puts lines of the earth in rotation surface. Calculate line centers of each line rotation, higher south. Avatar sets lines of communication lines and measure in correlation setting, and the sim navigates the system and travel. Time sequence lines of correlation lines of 1 cycle and 3 lines of measure in correlation. Direct modification lines of correlation line connection setting of 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 location centers. Point lines of graphs, 1 line centers of 0, 2 line centers of 3, 3 line centers of 4, sets communication lines of 5, 6, 7, 8, sector, vector, and quad, and line screen lines, adaptation lines of surface and track locations. Done by equation. All right, that's set up. All right. The center system in line communication setting is all about understanding how to use your binaries, and that position of calculation puts everything in formations. So we ground line the center, right? An inhabitation zone and set location. That's outline calculations, right? Planet surface of planets in rotation spins. Sets lines of 3 triangulation line position of its program. Modification lines, core of the system and travels, point lines of graphs, outline rotation surface, and in-cycle line position travel and correlation lines of traction. Puts lines of division, XT1000 comes in a 2-waving panel. Scans lines, screen lines, adaptation of 1 cycle, and line rotations of 8 set locations. Travel point lines of graphs, sets lines of communication of its position, and center core in calculation. All right, done by equation. That's all set up. All right, so we go through the galaxy screen lines, 800,444,000. So we take the 4 tractions, 3 line division lines, and the calculation of 7, 7, 7, 1, 7 location, 1, 7 lines. Process communication lines are positive and lists them negative, sets lines of communication line center interference. Negative equals lines of pause location setting. Position lines of past, present, and future adaptation location. Okay? So in that position, Everything in the setting changes lines of 4-4 tractions. Past, present, and future comes into triangulation split lines of anomaly. That correlation lines is 7 tractions, 7, 2, line centers of 4, 7 lines of 8 in track location. Position is process lines of 0 grounds. Cross communication line setting in rotation surface and track location line setting into all line rotation surface and traction. Okay, that my question. All right. Getting into that calculation screen line, adaptation of surface, crosses all levels of segregation. All right. Bring it down, levitate. All right. The communication line has a star line mechanism one program that position lines at 5 centers and track location line settings application. Right. Direct modification lines, cycles lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 locations. Now direct lines of panels, sets lines of course, directs lines of delta headings, and 4 platforms of communication lines of 6/8. That position lines of solar sail and track location line connection to position. Sets lines of communication to the sun that comes into modification screen lines, adaptation lines of surface, in a seed or correlation setting and constellation path in calculation. Right? All right. So getting that correlation setting track lines is all levels. Now the first line interference, that's one signal. Triangulation split lines of anomaly in a ground location. Process communication lines is a circular line communication with its earth line rotation surface. Now direct lines calculations is one center, one panel, one line, split lines anomaly, and a 3-line rotation surface. That position lines is ground lines and operation cycles and correlations of I-set location. I-central line calculations that is a data highway and a 4-line split lines of anomaly and a 4-line rotation of flux. Position lines is pattern. Let's go through coloration. Let's go through detection screen lines. Adaptation surface in center course system and travel correlation line setting in calculation. It's inside calculation, right? All right, so we set up lines of perimeters in a 2, 2, 2, 4-track location. That processes communication lines, and we go into orange, which is the add the line communication with Fibonacci, and center course settings and travel. Directs modification line screens, high center interference, and a blue line rotation surface, earth tone correlation lines attractions. All right. Now we get in directions. We go through the X2000 platitudes, comes outline signal into lines of east, north, west, and south and track locations in a 3-line rotation surface and traction. Okay. Now the formation line ground lines opens all signals in line communication of portals. It releases program set lines to its avatar sequence and line connection setting of its program in line rotations in calculation set location. Right. Very complicated stuff when you get into higher levels of travel and direct signals locations. All right. Getting in line division is understanding the correlations, and the test is basically trying to get into the encryption, try to understand how to use it through the positive and negative lines. Let's go through line communications, direct and redirect in calculations, but it's going in the same direction, right? So this is direct and this is redirect and calculation, all right? But it's going in the same direction, right? So I want you to understand how you go through one pattern, see that waiting signal? So if you understand that, then you understand the graph, how it goes into prime numbers in track locations, how it indicates its volume and graph calculates screen lines into its planet of surface location. All right. Planets come in a line screen. They direct line signals and panels through pi and traction. Okay. They have a direct line signals at all levels, how they use their line communication setting and classical correlation track lines into their galaxy shift lines of communications of face recognition. Okay. So getting in that position line centers, you have to understand how to set up the graph calculation line screen location setting. Starting line communication of 444 track location line settings. into proficiency. Now, the efficacy location to its professionalism is all levels of probe location lines of a D line centered and a theta line rotation surface and tracking lines of measure that scales its balance and set communication to its avatar set location. Right there through channel. Sets communication line screen, out through equation, right? All right, direct line signals. All right, so we're going to go through line signal locations in one graph. That one graph line signals one setting rotation surface. Puts position lines as centers in line calculation setting to your track locations of your flux in a 3 waving cycle and traction. All right. Now, direct line signals, we have XT1000 platitude line screens, and we got set location of center correlation lines of 4 track location. Direct line signals, sun comes in position of location center of travel. And the moon surfaces lines of triangulation line conditions over cross line signals in line rotation surface and traction. Direct lines of the moon. Moon line rotates the surface and sets up a moonbeam and line screens in direct line centers to a black hole in its rotation path and line setting location to its calculation. Very powerful stuff in calculations, locations, intelligence. Right? All right, so that's done. Pathogen line screens and theta lines of observation system is all about understanding how to use your oscillation paths, guys. Getting that lines of O lines equals lines of OS, calculation lines of OG, and calculation lines of OZ, and calculation lines of XYZ, calculation lines centers equals lines of XXG, sets communication lines, ground levels, sets correlation lines and atmosphere line screen in the position of CPE, U line rotation. Direct modification lines a center line as a circle line rotation surface and travel. Points lines as graph calculation lines to a Y line center and line position location of half pipe that sets its communication screen lines adaptation to a Fibonacci line swirl and all direct signals in correlation lines attractions in calculation line position, turning it into a line calculation setting to a flower of recognition of space lines of communication of time. Oh, the flower of life. All right, now getting into the ozone, you have to understand the core lines. There's communication lines in one factor. Let's put participant track lines, so go through the ground centers. We're going to go through line screen lines of one ground line surface and tractions, right? Direct modifications, center core system. So we go through track lines in back in time, one sequence, one correlation, one clocking, right? We center core split lines of one center, right? Now we add position more lines of a bold signal to one location. Triangulation line setting and rotation surface. Okay. Now that track lines one signal in position of one panel. That sets lines of communication. We go through the black lines, correlation lines of graph communication, illumination graph set lines of communication. Flower times directs modification lines of calls. That calling line rotation in track location setting opens all signals in calculation modification. All right. Now, directing lines of communication grounds, we bring in the XT1000, but this time the color reads as green line screens. So that's communication of cloak and dagger in a 3-line rotation. Green line rotation centers, 1 tractions and 2 line cycles in set locations. Correlate to tractions in 1 line surface and track locations. Now, directing lines, got to bring that in. Okay, it's traveling too fast. Secure line defense lines crosses line stream. We got to make sure that we go into the opposite direction settings where it comes into all calculation. Modificate the ground lines into all line centers. So it's direct and redirected laser. And travel lines of rotation surface attractions. Direct modifications, we bring in the blue. Blue lines location is the AVR settings. Open sequence, open correlation line tractions. Sets lines of correlation tracks center interference into line condition setting and track location. Direct calculation line interference become an invisibility line screen. Sets correlation lines to 1 cycle, line setting, rotation surface, and track locations to 4 line splits of an anomaly track location. Done by equation. Now it's done, right? Now, if you look really close, you can see the illumination graph lines into calculations hologram line screen, how it comes into blue and red and white, right? That's the course setting line interference and navigation of real-time tractions. That puts all levels of capsulated lines of screens, all right? Okay, so we formulate the screen line and illumination graph lines in the center communication to its setting. Processes communication lines to a dome, right? Center core line center high interference. We change the line centers of center core system that sets up all lines of energy and track locations. cobwebbing, cog lines, high interference, spider webs, correlation, track interference, webbing line signals, light webs, dark webs, track line communication, interference, high position program, detecting high screen, high calculation setting to binary, in resistors, correlation, track interference, copy and paste, value lines of vast line condition setting, initiate run program, and track case line condition setting, and process squared line center interference coming into line communication, waiting on the signal, and line position location of the lotus, in position propellers, track location line condition setting, all levels operation system, ocular line communication to its occupi, direct line signals and set location to its setting in operation line surface, turning all communication heart line direct signal location to its flywheel, track location line condition setting, coloration line screen, high interference, high position program location to its binary line, calculation modification coloration lines of pathogens, direct modification line calculation setting, in calculation to its capacitor screen line interference, into flux capacitor communication, auto reaction, all communication lines, response position location, ocular and communication setting. There's the occupi. Done by equation. It's all set up, right? Waiting on signal. There it is there, right? There's the octopus. Okay. Breathe, people. Breathe. So we go through heart measure. 3 central line correlation lines, attractions, direct line signals. Now we go through modification line screen interference. We adapt the signals and line position calculations. Past, present, and future comes in line signals. Security line panels, panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, and track locations. Cross line signals, 4, 4, 4, and set calculations. Direct modification lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cross line 6, line 8, line rotation graph. That's my equation, right? Center core line, center high interference, the second communication lines, energetic dome line interference, high position probe calculation line interference, ocular line communications, direct modification lines, occupi correlation, track interference, high position probe location, indicate high end location setting, cross communication lines, AVR line rotations, virtual reality correlated line interference, heartbeat line rotation, signal line communication, position probe location setting, done. All right. The center communication line setting, there it is again, see? All right. So we have an upwing line swing and we have a down cross location, right? 2 occupies and line centers is 2 central calculation line settings and past, present, and future. Crossing line signals at 4, 4 track locations, right? All right, so provision lines of cycles and correlation lines of attractions. What's above in position calculation setting is down cross location as screen lines, adaptation lines of surface, and track location. Ooh-ah, right? Down through equation. All right? All right, so directing signals is really understand how to use graph correlation lines of attractions. This opens all line communication to your settings, all right? Putting this in process, understanding line calculation setting to its lotus. Now we go through securing line screens, indirect line signals. We cross as lines of emblem, enabled lines of 1 default channel and 4 track location. Direct calculation line, ground lines, flywheel track lines, and setting 1 position operation. Direct lines correlation setting to an orb line in probing and rotation surface and tractions. Direct calculation lines, so we go through the signal lines of zeros, cross line signals going into the opposite direction cycles, 0 correlation lines at inventory track locations, in position of program. Okay, all 0 correlation, right? Then we go through the center connection setting, and then we connect the dots. Okay, we connect the dots and all central settings in all communication to its program and line calculation setting information. Directed communication line center is a code living line rotation. Now it's an entrapment line, screen line interference to escape lines of value that rotates its surface. The track division line cycles has a core traction, indirect signals, and 1 position to its location system. The program line center is a platform line center is a 45-degree angle. That direct case setting to the sun in rotation surface puts colossal communication channels of operational line condition setting of configuration. Done by equation, all right? I know it's a lot to take in, but it's amazing how you see communication lines of the occupi, right? High central calculations, up above swing lines, and position down cross location stream. Cross and signals is all about understanding how to formulate its equation line, screen location, adaptation lines of service. Puts position of the process. Let's go through 4, 4, 4. Cross, 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 and 3 settings, right? Equals lines, correlation lines, 1 panel, 1, 0. Flux, capacitor, and correlation, right? Direct line signals, 1 signal, 1 center, 1 operation, right? Travel lines and triangulation lines, this goes in back in time. All right, so we rotate the surface in Fibonacci in one swirl locations. I'm setting up an algorithm so you understand how to use it through your encryptions, through your binaries, your transistors, and your resistors of pi. Okay? Okay. Direct lines of circles, sets communication lines of 0, 0, 0, 0. Communicate equals lines of high calculated setting and travel lines of one position of 2, 3, 4 in set location. Direct calculation lines of the opposite direct signals, 2, 3, 4 and tractions. Direct modification, one signal, one rotation center and correlation lines of traction. Direct modification ground lines, sets communications to its dimensional of its location grid in calculation. Okay, that is an encryption. Okay, how it comes in line setting. This is this. This is this. All right. So you have to understand the film strips and set location of hieroglyphics and set location. Two track line provision lines of highways, track lines high center interference, flux correlation lines, triangulation box lines, all lines center high interference, 6 line communication lines of Fibonacci line squirrels, crossing line, 4 lines, 3 lines rotation surface, and 1 line rotation cycles, and a 8 line rotation center and correlation line in setting, and travel correlation lines to 1x line. 1 equals lines of L, lines of grounds into ozone layer and track location. Directs modification lines into Z force, sets correlation lines, high center interference of box, into flux, into triangulation, into flux, into line center triangulation, ground line centers, 1 ground line rotation surface and traction. Done by equation, right? So it's amazing how you center line your system and all levels of coordinates and navigations of flights and an 8 line rotation cycle and a correlation line condition setting, crossing signals of 444 track location in a provision lines of pi and hieroglyphics in calculation setting, all through aerodynamics and screen location. Mega multi-pass. This is an extremely encryption high line setting. Okay, position lines of center is really understand how to use the program line set location of 0 line. 0 gravity equals lines of 1 line, cycled lines of 0 location setting to flux and correlation lines of tractions. Everything is an encryption, everything is a film projector. Okay, so you have to understand how to get into modification, screen lines, adaptation line calculation setting, right? Platforms of 1 in position of 2 dimension lines of 3 tractions. Let's allocate 1's lines of 4, 5, 6, 8, and 12 set location. Platform 1, triangulate 1 center, 1 operation, 1 signal location. Travel correlation lines of flux and 4 set locations. Intelligence, right? You can see it. There is the clustrum in set location. Intelligence, right? Everything's formation of intelligence. The structure of the design of the building has a face. Okay? The center core system is all levels of travel. We have to understand how to identify its awareness of consciousness of its location and its location grid of where it is in track location to its energy dome and track line connections. Process communication lines of its platforms is understanding how to use the 4 signals in line setting high interference and cross line communications. Getting direct lines of your highways, omnis, or anything neural links and travel puts you in satellite communication. Direct lines of platforms in your earth line rotation surface in crop circles and line design and track location. That my equation. Right? But it's amazing how you come into the oculars to set location. Right? Just showing you how powerful it is, what intelligence can do in all frame communication. So now you understand the above and the set location below, right? There's no single line communication, separation, triangulations, because we have the ocular location divisions now. Right? So we come into the pineal glands, sequence lines, the correlation line, track interference, high calculation lines, the program location lines, CPU line, rotation center, correlation center, track, and position location, calculation, division. Direct lines is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. 12 line communication, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Graph communication. Graph communication lines and graph calculation. Done. Right? Platforms are 1, 2, and 3 in track line connections, 4 lines of waving, 1, 2, 4 settings of correlation setting to track lines, 1, 2, 3 lines hieroglyphics, and a 4-line rotation surface. That's my question, right? Graph calculation lines, overcross screens, graph lines of 1, alpha, delta, theta communication, omega line rotation, center correlation lines of traction. Cross-line signals, communication and graph calculation screens, done by equation, right? All right, so that's done. Graph calculation, screen lines, adaptation lines. We go back in triangulation, line position, its position of this program. Modificate line interference in sonar correlation lines attractions. Direct modifications, center line communication. Center communication line center. Done by equation. Picked up in cluster correlation setting to an energetic dome line, rotation surface, and track location of center calculation. Hoo-ah! Woo! Look how powerful that is. Okay, all through encryption. Okay, so as you look at formula, you look at equation of formula. It doesn't matter. What it matters are you understand what you're doing through structure in visual line communication setting, cortex line calculation setting, how you set these things up in hieroglyphics, correlation, direct signals into hieroglyphics, correlation tracking interference, aerodynamics, line center high interference, indirect line single location setting, crossing lines of 444 track location of 0 calculation 1 graph, inline rotations to an energetic dome screen, indirect line modifications to a center cord system, and travel coordination line interference, and an 8-line and division line calculating setting of Vega and rotation surface of intelligence information line grounds of navigation setting. Down by equation. All right? I know it's very powerful, but when you just take a look at it one more time, how that's set up in real time. Okay? All right. Complacements is understanding the graph correlation. Getting direct signals is understanding how to modify all this in line set applications. So let's go through the earth line rotation surface, border communication line, screen lines adaptation location. Now the center core system has a one center spot line. That's a graph correlation of the one center. Process is traveling through that in line position location of seconds, minutes, and hours and track location. Track calculation lines is one symbol, one rotation, one surface, one track lines of space lines of anomaly. Sets communication cross line signals in line connection setting to a thimble that rotates its surface and track location. Direct modification line screens sets lines of one center, one surface, one rotation, one correlation, one panel, one calculation setting. Position of this process is understanding how to use the ground line, a circular line connection setting in rotation to the calculation system of crop circle location. Done by equation. All right. So the central line centers are split lines of 3 lines of track location and ground calculation lines of graphs. The sets communication lines of high interference, ground powers, and amplifying condition setting, encryption, right there. All through set application. All right. So there's so many ways to do the test, review, and evaluation. One is through traction. Okay. Grounds, powers, atmosphere. Grounds, powers, atmosphere. Okay. Higher self, avatar, sim, navigation. All right. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right. That's what it is. All right. Directed signals. Okay. Now we go into line signaling. Now this is going to get more complicated because we're going with the graph correlation. The graph correlation line is a compilation center. That's where you come into double prints line communication, copy, paste, and M location enabled. Direct lines of defaults. DX line equals lines of DX line is a 1. One traction, 2 line division. Correlation line to track line overcrosses lines and rotation lines of surface. Now we go through pattern lines of rotation, 1 cross line signal, 1 0, 1 platform, 1 center, 1 rotation surface. Position lines of 1, 2, 3, and 4 set location. Cross line signals in center line of communication of solar tractions as application. All right. So you have to learn how to use your inventories and create it through anomaly of its image through all communications to its encryption. Ground, powers, and atmosphere. Okay, that's the test. Okay, how to put that all together in set position. Okay. All right, so as we get into the graph calculation, screen lines, adaptation lines of surface, the graph communication line has one signal line rotation center, graph calculations, right? Graph communication line, screen lines to its energetic dome to a location grid in travel correlation. Sets communication line screens in set position and travels in 3 settings. Setting communication lines, cross location. This is you crossing lines into another dimension line, screen line, and adaptation lines of surface. Now, getting in position as a platform is understanding the central system of travels of dimension in rotation surface and track location. Okay? So it's really interesting where it goes into a swirl, 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 swirl into portals in line setting to a half pipe that allocates line centers of time and rotation surface and clock location of seconds, minutes, and hours in track location. Done by equation. The metric line screen is all of our understanding adaptation lines of surface. Now we understand the ground lines, set course settings, power lines, and position the atmosphere line screen location. Now it's all of our understanding how to set a line communication setting to travels. Going through the Earth, going through space. All right, so that's what it is. Earth, space, ground, power, atmosphere. Right? The only difference now is your platforms are no longer 7. You're in a 4-line settings, crossing line signals now through your data highways. That's what it is in tractions now, right? So that process communication lines the XC1000 so they can dock centers in both track location of space and time in track location, right? Because they have to land, right? The center core system of the Infinity E8 rotates the cycle in tractions. Process communication line interference in track location is to understand how to use your flywheels and line position of all line communications of configuration of face recognition. There's the face. Boom. Right? There it is right there. There's the face. Look. See, you see coming out. All right. So, understand how to draw is knowing you already know how to draw. But once you understand the Earth and the space and the ground, the powers, and the atmospheres, everything comes in 7. But your line center location setting is now crossing signals to your data highways. So it's going to get a lot more confusing, but a lot more fun because you have to understand how to go through both ways and track locations to intersections and line positions of a 4-waving panel and line set location of traffic correlation. All right, so direct line signals, let's get 4 stop signs and track stop signs, right? Car going this way and car going this way, right? You're going this way, car's going that way, right? So I'm just showing you how this all works, lines and set locations. You have data circuit location setting and all communication really is up here, right? She's up there. So what she's doing in position or circuit screen lines adaptation, she's in your position to your vessel in track location. She's controlling your dispatch line screens. So it's really interesting how this is all set up, positioning your data highways and how Aurelia sees everything, a dispatch of location, right? Same correlation lines of Asgard, towers of communication, okay? And position lines, all of Gypsy Von Q and portals of correlation. And center lines of communication, the flywheel track location of descent traction and calculations, right? So it's all about understanding how to use that in line communication, how it all aligns this formation of its data, crossing lines of platforms, and line signal, cross line signals and set locations, where you can go through travel lines and cross line communications of travels in portals, flywheels, and Asgard in location setting. Okay, that's how it's set up right now. So your 8-line rotation lock line screen. Position of process is understanding how to go through your data lines. As a core track interference, it has a data circuits, these screen lines, set lines of communications. That's why you want you guys to get your encryptions in 4 settings, right? 2 batteries in position location, and you got electrical line communication, cross line signals. So if you ever understand the circuitry board, you understand how it sets up a point graph communication sending the travel. Circuitry board, motherboard, right? When you're on a plane and you're landing, you're seeing the landmass. That is its modem. That is its position location, right? So once you understand that, then you understand the circuitry board because that's what your Earth is. If you understand that, then you understand the encryptions and set calculations. Grounds, powers, atmosphere. Okay? Controlling the grounds of the higher self, controlling the powers of the connections of the avatar, and controlling the navigations in your settings and set locations. Okay? All right. So processing the communication lines of data and how this all works is knowing exactly how to sequence the patterns and how to direct lines and correlation lines of track lines to all line communication setting of colossal communication. All right? All right, so once you understand the central systems of view, you understand the center core setting, all right, of your data. But now you're in 8-line rotation platforms. Both signals, crossing line calculating setting, all line position. You're on both sides now. But the center core system of the team is everywhere. They're all line communication, they're highways, especially in their narrow links, higher line communication and process correlations of platforms and traction, right? So once you understand that, then you understand the grounds, then you understand the powers, then you understand the clouds, your iCloud correlation lines of track location, setting, and position, right? But you're always in position locations in line position of Vega above set location, right? So I want you to understand how this all works because it's going to understand more levels of you through your data and your position of programs. How it all lines this communication system. Then you have archetypes coming in, then you have XD thousands coming in, tractions, and then you got portals lying here in set locations. You know, they come in this cycle, they go in this way, and line conditions in and out in audio, but it's all in platform communications through your remote. Okay, all through central calculations of your circuitry boards, of your grounds, powers, and atmosphere set location. All right, done by equation. Let's look at that again, shall we? Rounds, powers, and atmosphere. Encryptions of 333. Okay, take a good look at it. Okay, done by equation. All right, see you guys at 5. Dee-dee.